Welcome, everybody. I am Rick DiClemente. This is Astrology Unplugged, version episode 319. So I told Liza tonight, will you please one time take over the show for me? Just one time. She said, no. So she won't do it. And I know she'd do a fine job, but she won't do it. So in exchange, she's going to go watch the news. Oh my God. Who can watch the news today? Anyhow, welcome aboard. Tonight's topic, I've been preempting the show. I got a little bit of horse throat, so put up with me. Preempting this show with discussion yesterday with Rick about the topic I came up for this week, which was the planets are volatile now, and we need to show you why. We realize that everybody here is at different levels of knowledge of astrology, and tonight's level is for, how do I put it? It's very advanced. Some weeks are very simple, and in order to show you to penetrate through all the view of all the planets, because they can look all bundled up. It's hard to do when you're a beginner. I'm going to be removing a lot of planets from the chart and showing you the critical ones, and that will show you why. I've been studying the planets very closely this week, and I think you can sense around you. Mercury's just gone direct. We have a tremendous T-square going on right now, and I think almost everybody's feeling this very volatile Mars that's going on right now. I will show you. I'm using the screen wheel type tonight to show you the signs of the zodiac. You can see that Mars and Pluto are just about exactly opposite. How about this? I met a friend today, and the eclipse was just at 29.5, and his son, his daughter was born at 0 point. So the eclipse was right before the cusp, and the sun and moon both went into Taurus, and the child was born. It's amazing to watch this stuff. And that's why birth time is so critical. I will remind you once again, I don't care what you're doing in life, get the birth time. Whether you buy a car, you move into a house, you meet somebody slaps you across the face, I don't care what it is, mark down the time that the event happened. Then you can slap them back across the face. No, then you'll have a chart on what happened. And you can understand the nature of that entity. Everything is an entity. An event is, a dog is, a person is, a car is, a planet is, a race is. So we see today, and this is what really got me going, look at these planets. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 planets, if you count the North Node. 6 planets in Taurus. Now, 6. See, Pluto is opposite Mars. And I told you last week or so that one of the weird things that's happening now is when all these planets are bunched up, then some planet breaks out of the pack, goes on a solo trip by itself and goes through the empty space, especially the moon. We can see Mars is starting to break up this fan now, this fan that's shaped like a fan. Mars is starting to get out front and break up this pattern, but it's going to have a while. And it's been doing so because Mars has been really unusual. I got Mars on one of my planets. It's going to be there till February. It's been on me for months. This is very unusual Mars transit right now because it backed up and it went retrograde, which it really rarely does every 2 years. Then it took forever to slowly start forward. So Mars is finally starting to move. Now, what's happening here the main guy in this whole story is Pluto. And Pluto has been in Capricorn since 2008 until now. And in February, it went into the sign of Aquarius, and all this talk about Pluto going into Aquarius. And just yesterday or so, Pluto stopped and now it's retrograde. It's going to go back into Capricorn. It's going to go forward. So don't be freaked out when you hear the word retrograde, because people freak out about it because they hear Mercury retrograde. The outer planets go forward generally. The outer planets go forward for 7 months of the year and backward for 5. That's very common. And sometimes 5 of them are retrograde at one time. Whereas Mercury retrograde, forward for 90 days, backward for 21. Forward for 90 days, backward for 21. So don't let the word retrograde scare you. It's very misunderstood. Now, what we're seeing here is Pluto is the main player in this chart, because Pluto has been sitting right there, and right at 28 degrees, which is right there, right at 28 degrees is the natal Pluto of the United States of America. So Pluto, for all these years, for over 260 years, Pluto has been going all the way around the circle and making different things happen, and world wars and Holocausts and all these different things. And just a few months ago, Pluto returned right here. Now, it returned here, it went into Aquarius. Now it's going to go back, hit it again, go back, hit it again on its way out, and then it will come out finally for good, and it'll go into Aquarius and stay there for, I think, something like 20 years. Now, when Pluto goes through a sign, it's either a short end of things because of its oval elliptical orbit. Pluto is in a sign such as Sagittarius for just 15 years. And over in Gemini, it's 30 years because it has a non-circular orbit. That's why. Now, I just got a wish list item from somebody, an email that asked me if I would talk some evening about the generations, the Pluto and Leo generation, my parents' generation, the Pluto and Cancer generation, my kids' generation, the Pluto and Scorpio generation. So we'll do that some night, and that's very interesting, and it will fill in a lot of blanks for you in your head. Marcia's got her camera sideways. Now it's right. There we go. We're taking a walk around Marcia's yard. Okay, so as I was telling you, when Pluto has gone on and returned over the United States natal Pluto, it doesn't just stay there. It's going to go around for another 240 years. But the whole time where it's around, the natal position is very volatile. And I've used the analogy before. It's like somebody parking a great big 18-wheeler truck full of dynamite next to your window. It's like somebody staying parked there, okay, for a long time, years. You don't know what's going to happen. Maybe nothing will happen. Maybe el kaboom will happen. We don't know. But when Pluto returns to where it started, it becomes a major chapter in the end of the tome. Boom, the major book on Pluto comes closed. That was open, boom, 1776. It's coming closed, chapter 1, boom, February 2023. So, before we get into talking about Eris, some of these other planets that are very important right now. What has the Pluto return done? And you can all see this with your eyes. And we've talked about it for years as we got past 2005, 2006, and Liza and I started to inspect and look forward. We started talking about what was to be during the 2008, 2009 time period. And we started to talk about how things were going to start falling apart. And they have. And they're not falling apart because the planets want them to fall apart. That's what you got to get through your head as an astrological viewer. Things are not getting bad because Pluto wants them to get bad. They're falling apart because they are bad. Pluto's merely telling you about it. It could be wonderful. Could be ecstatic. And Pluto would be rewarding us and showing us how well we're doing. But that's not the case. And the real critical turning point, was when they locked the little kids up in little cages in New Mexico and Arizona and split them from their family. Don't kid yourself. That was the turning point in America, because that invalidated the sign on the side of the Statue of Liberty. We're Americans. We're America. We're great guys. Bring us. You're tired and you're poor and you're sick, and we'll take care of everybody. No, we won't. That's Pluto. Pluto's not about changing your mind. Pluto's about standing your ground. Pluto is about your mission statement. Pluto is the ruler of Scorpios. And the main word that I have received in my mind through working with Pluto for many years, and some planets, some signs boil down to one word. Pluto does too. It boils down to one word, and the word is betrayal. There will never be any betrayal. I will never betray you. You will never betray me. My country will never betray you, etc. That's the heart of the Pluto archetype. Each of these signs and planets have a central archetypal theme. We don't know why, but they do. So when Pluto returned, I gave the analogy of, hey, kids, I'm going for a long trip. I'll be gone for 250 years. Here's $500 million. Use it well. I'll be back to check on you. 240 years later, Pluto comes back and it checks to see how we spent all those millions of dollars. Simple question with Pluto. Did we use it? Did we abuse it? That's the story. And so we saw it from our early writings and our early predictions in 05 and 06 and 07, we saw that people would start getting disillusioned with America. And a different way of putting it is people would stop buying the myth. People would stop buying the myth of America that is written on the side of that plaque on the Statue of Liberty. Oh, we didn't really want to mean that. Now send them kids back over there. Well, we're going to have to separate it from their parents and keep no record of it. Just send them back. Because they're rubbed up against the Cancerian nature of the country, July the 4th. Boy, that's a different tune than what's written on that plaque. That was a turning point. Doesn't mean it's the end. Doesn't mean we're going down the drain, but it sure sobered up a lot of people. And of course, they wanted to blame Obama, and they wanted to blame Trump, and they wanted to blame whatever, instead of stepping up. And Pluto's all about that. I guarantee you, if we had stepped up in 2005, 6, 7, 8, and the Pluto return was in 2022, 23. If we had stepped up, 2023 would have been a glorious time, and we would be cascading full of presents and full of rewards and full of other countries bowing to us out of our good nature. Instead, now they're putting warnings out in their travel agencies to countries like Korea and Germany and England and Australia. These people are being warned not to travel to America. And I told you this was going to happen. I told you for years it was going to happen because we had to start playing better with our play partners, or this was going to happen. It's that simple. Why did this happen? Well, the number one reason it happened was because of this. Wrong chart. Here's the USA's chart. Okay. So when Pluto, there you see Pluto in late Capricorn, when Pluto got it to around 13 degrees, this would have been about 2011, 2013. When Pluto got to that area, Pluto started to oppose the natal Pluto in the chart. It got to here. Wait a minute, I'm wrong. I'm confusing you. It got to here and it started opposing the sun. That's right, 13 degrees. It got to 13, it was opposing the sun. Now, whenever you have an opposition to the sun and you put it on the zodiac, the sun sits on the ascendant and the transiting planet sits on the descendant. And when Pluto was hitting the sun, which is an identity crisis, the identity crisis was further informed to us by the seventh house, because Pluto was coming across the zodiac from the seventh house, hitting the sun in the first house. And this definition, I told you for many years, the definition of a seventh house transit is you had better start playing nicely with your open enemies. The 12th house is your enemies you don't know about. The seventh house is enemies you do know about: Korea, Russia, China. And I told you we had better start playing better with them, more fairly, more on top of the table, or we were going to start facing this kind of comeuppance. And that is what has happened. Right on track. That started with Pluto opposing the sun. Then the Pluto returned, and what we're getting through the 2008 through now and next 10 years, next 20 years, we're getting a long-term identity crisis. It's exactly what it is. I'm not going to do it, but some night I'm going to do a whole show on how the GOP became nothing, how it dissolved into nothingness, which is where it is now. It doesn't exist anymore, just an illusion. Now, I'm not going to defend the Democrats. It's just that I have a chart for the Democrats that I'm not sure is accurate, but it seems to be pretty accurate. We'll talk about that some night. So the GOP has dissolved into nothing, like the Wicked Witch, and we're in bad shape. So while that Pluto is sitting there, remember that great big truck is full of all that dynamite sitting right next to our house. While it's sitting there, you ain't going to tell it to move. What do you think happens when other trucks drive by, or noisemakers come by, people with sparklers come by? What do you think happens? It's a very dangerous time period. So when we go to the charts, this is the USA's chart. these lines are very confusing. And remember that since the 1700s, before the 1700s, we didn't even know about any planets beyond Saturn. We didn't know about Neptune. We didn't know, I'm sure we knew about the North Node. We knew about Neptune. We did not know about Uranus till the 1700s. We did not know about Chiron. We didn't know about Pluto. We didn't know about Eris. So all those planets were unknown. So if you take a look at the United States chart back in 1776, without the birth time, this is probably close because the birth time is a big argument in astrology. But in this chart of America, we will take this and we will remove the North Node, Eris, Chiron, Pluto, Neptune, Uranus, and we'll leave Saturn. Okay, this is how the chart was when this country was formed. And there are many, many books on the subject that our early founders had astrological knowledge. And I really believe it because this is an unbelievably good chart. This is a chart of resourcefulness. Brand new being, born in Cancer, the sun next to Jupiter, next to Venus. Come see the prairies, see all the open land that's there for you to just take. And while you're at it, I'm not sure of everything here, but while you're at it, we'll put Saturn in Libra at the top of the chart where it's exalted and it's in its best house, and that will affirm the position that we're in charge of the planet. We're in charge. That's what happened. And that's how we confirmed it. And then what's intriguing is this kind of bucket pattern all swings from the moon. We put the moon in Aquarius. That was dependent upon the hour that the declaration was signed. And there's a lot of debate, like I say, on the actual birth time. So the moon in Aquarius ensured that not only are we the father to all other countries, we're also the mother. This is a lot of weight to put on ourselves. This is the new country. This is the new age. Big oceans on the side. Quiet Canada. Quiet Mexico at the bottom. Nobody messes with us. Until 9/11. And the Scorpio dude figured out a way to mess with us. And he was pretty darn accurate. Well, what did he do? He didn't just blow up the towers and the Pentagon. He exposed us. Bin Laden was a Scorpio ruled by Pluto. So the Plutonian inherent in the Pluto return was brought to us via Mr. Bin Laden. So the trouble now is this. You can see that in this chart, that this chart started to change through the ages when we found Uranus and we found Pluto and we started putting the other planets around. Things started really changing as the US developed and exposed its nature. So I'll go ahead and put this chart back to normal. And you'll start to see Uranus, Neptune, Pluto, Chiron, North Node, Eris. I believe that's it. So this is how the planets are now. Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, Pluto, Eris. So we can see everything became much more complicated as we went through the ages. Okay, now, when you take America's chart and you start looking at, this is where the planets are right now. This is where the planets are right now at 8:04 tonight, Pittsburgh time. Now it's very confusing to work with this with 6 planets in Taurus and 2 planets in Aries. That's 8 planets, including the North Node. 8 planets out of 11. Okay, you just don't want things that concentrated. You just don't. The health of the zodiac is always better when it's spread out. When I read for people, I always like to see a chart that's nicely spaced out. It really, I think, helps the person stay balanced, counterbalanced. And I've noticed that to be quite true. Now, if we take a look at where the planets are now, it's still very confusing. So let's take these planets right now, and let's take off the moon and Mercury and Venus. And we'll leave Mars and take off Jupiter and take off the node. Now let's take a look at this chart. This is where the planets are now, without the other ones getting in your way of sight. You see, when you're transiting Venus or transiting Mars or transiting Jupiter, transiting Mercury, they're important, but they're really tiny impact compared to the power of these guys. These are the big mamas. So that's why I've removed them for simplicity. Now, when I've told you about learning about the speed of the planets, it's really ultra critical that you get up to speed with knowing how fast these planets move. Because when I look at Pluto, I can see where it's been, I can see where it's going, I can sense when, because I'm watching for so long. It stays 30 years on one side. You don't have to watch very closely, or 13 in some signs, and we just watch Pluto spend 13 years here in Capricorn, and it's going back into Capricorn. And when it goes back in, that's when it does its finale. When it goes back in and leaves the next time, and it's about to leave the stage and do its bow, that's when we're going to see, it's about a year from now, that's when we're going to see Pluto do its real finale to the corporations and all the institutions that have collapsed. That's when we're most prone to see a collapse of society. And don't kid yourself, it ain't far. And don't kid yourself, it really could happen. I'm not saying it will, and I hope to God it doesn't. But what has Pluto been doing in Capricorn? You can ask yourself, what did it do in Sag? What did it do in the sign of Scorpio? It has a long time to do those different things. And in Capricorn, what it did is it examined all of our institutions. Are they really for real? These institutions were based upon these mission statements. Did they really hold up? That's what Pluto did. And Pluto gave you a report card. Didn't come in and ruin anything. Pluto didn't do anything. It just gave a report card. It took those kids and it took their $500 million and it looked at their receipts and said, this is what you guys have done when I've been gone for 250 years. This is what you have done with the money. See, Pluto's real good about self-embarrassment, because Pluto is all about being honest with yourself and being courageous with yourself and being true to yourself and thus to others. So we have a lot of things to answer for. And now everybody's all excited because Pluto has gone into Aquarius and it's going back into Capricorn and it's coming back, and they have this myth in their mind that things are going to be wonderful when Pluto goes into Aquarius. And it's not going to be. And I'm not going to say it's horrible. And I do think that a heavy dose of Aquarian energy is the number one thing that we need, because it's very idealistic and it's very humane and it thinks about everybody else, not just itself. So While Pluto's sitting there, over the next 2 days, Mars is going to get to 30 degrees. It's going to get to 0 and be exactly opposite Pluto. And then it's going to move on a little bit. And what do you think's going to happen to that truck outside when Mars comes by and opposes that truck exactly for the next 2 days? You better be careful driving. You better be very careful with your tongue. One of the main things Pluto Mars will do, without a doubt, mark my word, one of the main things Pluto Mars will do in your chart and the collective chart is, if you've not been facing your problems, if you've been weak and not facing your bullies, you're going to be forced to. And you had better face them. Now, you don't have to get volatile about it and crazy and violent, but you'd better stand up for yourself. Number one. And if you don't, you can do it firmly and you can do it politely, but you better stand up for yourself or you're going to have real hell to pay. This is the kind of trigger. Mars is the main trigger in the zodiac. This is the kind of trigger that could start some kind of large-scale war planet-wide. It really could. Hope to God it doesn't. And we keep seeing people shooting missiles into the ocean, which is just fine with me. But this is some tough, difficult stuff. As Mars moves on and gets past that Pluto point, things are going to get a lot easier. We're going to start to breathe a lot better. It's going to be a lot better. But then Pluto's getting agitated by Mars. Mars is the agitator. And Pluto doesn't need being agitated when it's going through the middle of a tremendous identity crisis. Just use common sense. If I'm going through a tremendous identity crisis, I don't need somebody going, Dad, 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 Dad. I just don't need it. Not right now, child. So that's the main reason things are volatile right now. Now, you understand me? That's a good thing. All right. Thank you, Rep. Always good to be understood. Now, what we've forgotten about, and remember, oh my God, how do I put this? I'm going to remind you again. Around 2005 and 2006, there was a whole group of new planetoids that were discovered beyond Pluto, way beyond Pluto. And it doesn't matter in astrology how small they are or how far they are. It doesn't matter. It's got nothing to do with their strength or impact. Nothing. I don't know why. It's just how it is. In the Kuiper belt, this belt of like asteroids that are floating beyond Pluto, we found 80 new planets, and we found 6 new major ones. And the most major of them all we found was the planet called Eris. It's officially called a dwarf planet, a mini planet. Eris is her name, Eris. And Eris, I've told you a lot about her, is being placed upon more and more astrologers' charts. And basically, astrologers don't like to add new planets because they think that people are getting hyper, people who don't know what they're talking about. They're very loath to put new planets on the chart. But believe me, we have been in the age of Eris. We are in the age of Eris, more so than the age of Pluto. That's a big statement. Just now am I finally starting to see 2, 3, 4 astrologers now starting to put Eris on their charts. And they're going, because Pluto spends 120 years in the sign of Aries. It's still in Aries. It entered 1921. I don't have time to read any messages you're sending to me. I'm sorry. Now, Eris entered Aries 1921, which is why so many things began then. It's going to be there for about 120 years. So we got about another 20 years till it leaves the sign of Aries because it moves very slowly. Everybody sitting here has Eris in the sign of Aries. Now, you gotta just find out the basic nature. I've told you what it is for Pluto. The basic nature of Eris is Eris was a goddess. She is the sister of Mars. She was not invited to a party. And maybe at the right time, we'll enlist Mr. Rick, who tells me he's been raised with a lot of mythology, which is really valuable. Now, I'm not going to go much into her, but she was ignored. There was a major party of the gods. She was discounted. She was not invited. She was insulted by this. And so when she saw the gods at this party, she got mad. She took a golden apple and she engraved on the side of it, "Who is the fairest of all of you?" And she threw it through the window and broke the window and caused chaos amongst the party. And that's where she got the name, but being the goddess of chaos, which is why you've seen a whole lot of chaos since 2005. And it's not just because of Trump. They're one and the same. They're one and the same. Now, why does she do such a thing? Eris's nature is very simple, but it's not calm and dainty. Eris is about fairness. Let's have justice between all. Let's have people who were excluded. Let's have them included. She is the reason you've seen the Me Too movement. She's the reason you've seen the Black movement rise up, the women movement rise up. Okay. Hold on, please. Now, the problem with Eris is she will do whatever she has to do to come about with this fairness and to get you included. Pluto's not that way. Pluto did cause nuclear weapons. It did bring us Armageddon. It brought us the Holocaust. But Eris is different. Eris is, I don't care what lengths I have to go to bring about fairness, but I will. And this is the main reason that you're seeing this new mood across the planet. That is the mood you're seeing. It's the Arisian mood. Now, forgive me, one who just left, but maybe I got some parts of this wrong. Okay, I'm still learning, but this is the main reason why I'm pushing hard on Eris. Now, if you will take a look at the chart again. All right. All right. This is where the planets are now without the minor planets. And what happened was Pluto, when it came on the scene, when Eris has not moved very much since she got to 24. She's been 22, 23, 24. She's more or less going back and forth there, but she's not moving a lot because she's so far away. But for years now, 2020, 2019, 2021, Pluto and Eris were at a right angle to each other. They were 24. This is what's caused the problem. This is another truck that's parked across the street from our truck. It's got all the dynamite, and it's sending all these warnings over. It's shooting missiles over top of our truck, and things are dangerous. Okay? And what do you think happens when Pluto says, well, I think we'll just blow everything up? What do you think Eris says? Eris says, Well, okay, if we have to, and vice versa. They don't want to, but they're really a lot alike. And Pluto will get rid of you if you don't do your duty with evolution. If you halt or disturb the path of evolution, she will stop you, because she's the garbage cleaner, and that's her job. Eris will get rid of you if she's warned you. And a matter of fact, she doesn't warn you. Pluto warned us many times. We didn't listen. Eris doesn't warn you. Eris just comes in and does away with the things that are the obstacle. So the past 5 years, we've had a lot of danger as Pluto and Eris have been traveling at this right angle. Now I'm going to stop there and ask Rick to chip in here, because Rick is wonderfully talented, and not just talented. We've talked a lot. Rick has done his work. He doesn't go off the wall. He's not an astrological wannabe. He's the real deal. He has a lot of mythological training. And I know that he probably knows a lot more about Eris than I do. But I would like Rick to speak to us about this Pluto Eris that's been separate, and it's been separating. Now it's going to start coming back together again in its square. So could you speak however you would like about these two bodies? You're muted. Yeah, go ahead, Rick.
I will say that my work with Eris is recent, because she's an overlooked goddess. She was actually overlooked in the literature, you know. What's the word I'm wanting to say? Canceled. We all understand that term. It's like the ancient literature sort of cancels her. When you talk about not
Well,
being
was Eris possibly overlooked some because her brother was making so much noise, known as Mars?
Oh, I definitely think that has a lot to do with it. And also your pre-Hellenistic, it would have happened because prior to the Hellenistic period, there was a much more gentler, kinder perspective on the goddesses. But that Hellenistic urge, they all got tarnished, but the women got degraded. That was, and when you look at the distillation of Eris, had enough, won't take any more.
That's right.
That's where the others might have been a little bit less, they would have been more forgiving. She isn't.
And let's take one moment. I want to get back to you right where you're at, but I did think this is important. Everybody else, while Eris is moving Susan's paintbrush around the page and painting Claudia for us, how many people know what we're talking about, have been sensing within yourself or around you that people are fed up? How many people? You see it around you, different clubs, different organizations, within yourself. I think we pretty much get most people. Okay, thank you very much. I'm sorry, Rick, please continue.
Pluto's very misunderstood.
Yes.
The Bible refers to the valley of the shadow. Yeah, if you're going to pick something that's going to look at the shadow, that's Scorpio with the rulership of Pluto. So there's definitely a contribution to authenticity and looking at your stuff, your baggage.
Baggage.
Yes. And some bags are packed more than others. There is something that is very soulfully demanding about Pluto.
Very good.
And it also, kind of gets a little bit of that reputation from its connection to death. And death has been vilified for a long time. And somewhere along the way, there are some spiritual traditions that look at it and recognize death's not an enemy.
Right.
It is simply a change. And we all go through change. You can either fight change or embrace it. And it's not that you run headlong into it, but it's definitely scary and trippy and gets people all hung up. I also thought it was interesting. Did you notice that with Pluto in Aquarius right now, it is the only air planet? And when you think about a planet being a singleton and that being the space of communication, everybody's communication is probably motivated to be coming right now from a very deep place.
Yeah, I can sense that.
Mm-hmm.
And Pluto is the planet of death and rebirth.
Right. Everybody's taking themselves very seriously at the moment.
Boy, that's the truth. Wow.
Yeah.
Boy, that is true. But we are that serious, aren't we? Aren't we really that important? My God, I know I'm important.
Mm.
That's tough when you're trying to get 8 billion people being important at the same time.
Right. Right.
Ooh.
Yeah.
So, what do you think planetarily? I think it's Pluto square Eris still for the next 10 years. And I told Liza, I think Pluto is going to take at least 40 years, in my opinion, to rebuild a new identity for the country. What do you think is the main pressure point going on now?
Well, I think when you're identifying the Pluto Eris square, the slow movement, you can't go ahead and ignore slow movement. I think we're going to have other triggers along the way.
Right.
That I think we can try and play with. I sort of wonder, are we looking at maybe a 50-year shift because of the next Chiron cycle?
Very, very good point.
Chiron, Chiron, though, didn't seem to have nearly as much trouble as Eris getting put in the chart.
You're exactly right, because in 1977, when she was discovered, everybody came out of the woodwork and everybody wanted to be a healer. And everybody wanted to try all these home remedies, and Mother Earth News and all this stuff just came out, and all these natural remedies. And Chiron has fit in rather easily and well. But boy, I tell you, I've talked to Tarnus about Eris, and he thinks I'm overreacting. And I said, Mr. Tarnus, with all the greatest respect, I suggest you take another hard look at Eris. And I think people are. What about you? You starting to look at her?
Myself, Eris?
Yeah, you and Eris.
I am definitely plugging it in because I do think anything that prods at the psyche the way of that tired of being neglected is an important issue. And I think that's why Chiron's so important, because it deals with an unaddressed wound, and that's where you're feeling, where people feel the Eris issues. So I think that wounding really shapes spiritual formation, and that's what we're having highlighted, no matter where it is in our journeys. And that comes from my training as a minister too. That I think
I
is,
think you're right, because I think in a lot of ways, the US has never been wounded. You walk around Europe, you walk around the streets of Italy and France and England, and you can just sense it.
well, that
Well,
wounding
this
that
place
I'm
was
thinking
bombed and
about.
that place was bombed. And you don't get that here. La di da 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 da.
Well, I would throw a little light on that and keep in mind that it's also the idea of this wound is something that is incarnated from the past into the experience. And there are spiritual opinions as to who created America, who came as the founding fathers, what experiences through antiquity have they been part of that they came here. And I can see a wound that they came along with. They were offended by the lack of understanding from Britain over the unjust representation. And they broke away from the imperialism because they were colonies, but then they continued to go ahead and use imperialist thinking as they wiped out the indigenous people, and they continued the issues with the slave trade that had already begun before they were incorporated. So they had the wound of the land they came from, of believing that right makes might. That's hard to escape historically.
It was kind of like, I mean, look at the old movies and stuff. It was kind of like, hey, free smorgasbord. Just get across the ocean. Take what you want.
Yes, take what you want.
I don't think I'm wrong. I think that's how it was. And I think that Tecumseh tried to warn the other Indians. He said, that's what they're up to. You better fight with me. And they go, nah. We've been trading with them. And he goes, that's what they're going to do. They're going to bring diseases in their blankets, and they're going to bring their muskets. And they're coming. Nah. Well, he was right. But anyhow, I think you got some real good points there. I think there really is a close nature between Pluto and Eris. And I do want to not just go negative on you. And I want to show you something that's kind of surprising. I did a return chart for the United States, and it's really pretty good. Remember we did return charts last week? I did a return chart for the 4th of July, 1776 chart. Here it is. I'll show you the chart that will come about on this coming 4th of July. Let me get it on your screen. And then I will put the rest of the planets over there for you. Here it is. Let me fill it in. Okay, we want the moon, and we want Mercury, Venus, Jupiter, North Node. I think that's it. So here is the return chart of the upcoming 4th of July. I do not like Saturn. Yeah, had to be one bummer in here somewhere. And Saturn's a real bummer because it's 1 minute. It's 2 minutes from exact. It's retrograde, and it's 2 minutes from exact with the descendant. And that is exactly what I talked about. That is your known enemies. The 7th house is the house of marriage. It's the house of being a counselor. It's also the house of known enemies, enemies that you know you've got. And with Saturn sitting there being retrograde, I think it's very symbolic that we're going to have some very unyielding enemies that are going to stand their ground against us. I don't like the looks of this because this is not something easy to overcome. But I will say the rest of the chart looks pretty nice. I like the Venus and Mars in Aquarius. I like the Virgo rising. I like the Jupiter, Uranus up in the 9th house. I like the Gemini midheaven at the top. Now, I don't know what you see, Rick, but this Saturn just sitting right on the descendant, I think is very much a warning. What do you think?
I think it's also not so thrilling that Neptune happens to be in that house well anchored, because if you can, it just looks at deception, lies, and when you're talking about enemies, that and using confusion.
Smoke and mirrors.
Yeah.
Well, I do think it's got some good points, but what I want to hear from everybody else tonight. Now's when I want to open up the microphones to you. I'd like to know what you think, because I'm not going to waste your time with other minor planets, because the other ones are really minor compared to what we're talking about. I want to know what you feel about the identity crisis, what you feel America is going through. I keep asking the question, where are we going to get the stuff? Where are we going to get it from? Disinformation is definitely Neptune, yes. And Saturn is that strong in Pisces? Is Saturn that strong in Pisces? No, it's not. Go ahead, Rachel, if you wanted to speak.
Oh, no, I mean, I just put it in the chat. That
That's
was
okay.
all. Those were just my questions.
Well, what were you asking?
Oh, well, when Rick C was talking about Neptune being in the 7th house, I was just thinking, like, I don't know, postings on social media, for instance, things of that nature, just spreading disinformation. And then seeing Saturn, yes, that, I mean, right on the descendant, but also in Pisces. I'm like, I mean, how much teeth does that Saturn have? I mean, apart from its placement. I mean,
In my opinion, when Saturn's that close to an angle, you play down the fact that it's in Pisces, and you play up the fact that it's Saturn. That's what I have learned. It will be square to
okay,
the sun.
very good.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Other people have thoughts about what's going on? Everybody? Anybody?
I was thinking about what Rick C said about Eris being, that energy really wants to be heard. And I thought about it, and I thought to myself, there's a lot going on that I constantly hear. We probably all do, but maybe it's just my algorithm about the trauma and the not feeling heard, and how all people want to feel heard and understood, and especially the younger generation, but even not so much. And there's a lot coming up about that in ways that I've never noticed it as much. And again, when you think about a red car, then all you see is a red car. But
Right.
I don't think it's me. I think it's really happening. I think
It is. Yes, it is.
yeah. And that is so, talk about Eris and Pluto together. I don't know, when you were growing up, you had a crazy aunt. Your mom might have drank too much or whatever. But now it's like, this was unfair to me. And this was like, I didn't feel understood and blah, blah, I'm not saying, sometimes I think it's too much, but the truth is, it's good that, people have a chance to get this stuff out of their system, especially the young ones.
Yeah,
and there's probably
you're
other,
right. That's a good idea.
energies playing into it. I think our young generation is, the anxiety, the mental the mind is being misused. You know, it's good to use your mind when you're looking at a spreadsheet, when you're writing a speech, but for every single thing, like there's the loss of the heart and the
Yeah,
humanity.
and remember, we added 80 new planets, 18 new planets to the psyche in 2005.
Yeah.
That those, we added one in the 1700s, one in the 1800s, etc., and 80 new ones in 2005. And that's symbolic that our mind is, our psyche's ready to handle those energies. And Lord knows how 75 of those other planets are even like. Who knows what they're like? I mean, it's all happening so fast.
Yeah.
But I think you're exactly right.
Yeah.
The
I've asked
consciousness
Rick-
is expanding
Yeah.
exponentially
Yeah.
with the discovery.
Exactly. For instance, in the old days, as a counselor, I would go through a lot of divorce with people. He's a problem, she's a problem, let's get divorced. Right. Okay, whatever. We saw a plethora of that all over the country. Now what I'm seeing is, I know I contributed a lot to that. We're not getting along, but I'm getting out. But people are admitting that I played a lot of it, but I still want out. And I think that's a very good sign. People are definitely becoming more aware. They're becoming more aware where I screwed up, where I let the family down, where I did this at the wrong time. It's definitely clearly happening amongst counselors. I think.
I think it's interesting the way Claudia was highlighting the trauma and the wounding, considering Chiron in the US is rooted in Aries. That
I was
to
just
me,
thinking that. Yeah.
all about the identity, in the fourth house of the psyche. So
Yeah.
that's a really powerful insight there.
What
In that
question? Go ahead, Rick.
in that regard, I think Eris and Chiron are separately tuning into the same zeitgeist.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Isn't it something that all this is at one time? That's just amazing. It's amazing that Eris would come on the scene and be at a right angle to Pluto. Who wrote that one up? It couldn't be 57 degrees or 104 degrees or some weird degree. It had to be close to 90. Boy, I tell you, one thing I did say to Liza tonight at supper, I don't know what you guys think of this, but toss this around. I have a sneaking feeling that what happened to Greece, and what happened to Rome, and what happened to Egypt in terms of those empires falling is not going to happen to us. And I don't think it's my preference either. I think there is something special about the attempt to create an America type of entity that's going to get us past a lot of the problems. I don't think we're going to get to a nuclear war worldwide. We all have too much to lose. But what we do have in front of us is the Pluto and Aquarius. We need whole new solutions, whole new, brand new solutions like we've never even thought of, like Charles Eisenstein writes about. And I think that those people are coming about. What do you people think? Sean, Marcia, John, everybody? What's on your mind? What questions do you have or statements? Please feel free to just go ahead.
I have a question.
You're on.
Yeah. In all of everything I've heard about, I'm not an astronomer, I'm just a neophyte in all this, but everything I've heard doesn't help me to understand good and evil and where evil comes from. I can see hubris and pride, but to actually have a force of evil in the universe manifested in some way by a planet, somehow I don't see it.
I don't either.
Well, where does it come?
I don't think there is such a thing as evil.
Well, I mean, even if you want to go ahead and throw it in a corner and suggest that it's somewhere, you can't really expect the mythology, because the mythology
Right.
is a mix of humanity's shining qualities and ugly, tarnished qualities. It's a polarity, not an extreme. So that's why you have good and bad amongst the signs and the planets.
I like what you're saying, John. A lot of people try to assert and apply very negative intonations about, like, Rigel, I think it's called, Regulus, and some of the nasty stars, fixed stars, have very bad reputations. But I just refuse to believe that down deep that's their purpose. I just don't think it is. I think that archetypally, down deep in everybody out there, there is a positive purpose. Maybe that's naive.
Well, if you look at the way charts are interpreted, we hear very early on that an easy chart makes a lazy person. You need some hard aspects
Oh yeah, that's a
to
truth.
bring
That's a
strong
truth.
character.
Yeah, that's the truth. The most amazing people I've ever seen have a mess in their chart, and a lot of fighting going on. And it's definitely true. Come on, Marcia, but I know you got something inside those lips there. You are muted. I believe you are muted. I believe you. Yes, you're muted. And we'll get you unmuted. There you
Okay.
are. Now go.
I think all the new immigrants that are coming to our country, I think they're going to help us. I think they're going to bring new life to our country. And I look on that as a positive.
Very good. I like that.
I mean, a lot of them are going to struggle with places to live, what to do, being discriminated against in certain states, but I think they are going to bring a lot of good.
Face it, when you travel to almost any country, everybody says how nice the people are, how great the food was, how big the hugs were. I had 92 people take me to the airport when I left Rome. And my father and mother, 1978. 92 people took their cars to say goodbye to us.
Mm.
I couldn't believe it.
Hey, Rick, they weren't a legal escort, were they?
They were Italians with good food and good wine, and but I really like what Marcia had to say. I think that's glorious. I think that's really got a real good thing, because we do have a good, strong narcissistic sense. I watched a woman on a talk show the other day, and she was being nailed about this and that. She said to everybody, "Yeah, but we're America." And I just went, "Oh God, so what?" So they're Uruguay. So, but I think there's a lot of waking up, and boy, when I see people reacting against this wokeness, I'm pretty scared. Come on, Erica, now. Come on, Erica. I know you can unmute yourself. Thank you,
I've been
Marcia.
holding back.
Let's go, dear.
Okay, so I really think that all the people that have been marginalized,
Good word.
starting with well, I have to give one of the credits to disabled people, but then African American people, I mean, they are really helping this country go forward, and then the immigrants. But I think pretty much all the non-white healthy people have been the ones that have been afraid and holding things back, and the people that have been really striving and fighting to, for their rights, and to make it, that have been held back, have been saving us. They're like our goddamn life preserver. We wouldn't have had Biden in office if it hadn't been for Black people.
That's right.
Look at what Obama did with saving our economy. Every time the Republicans get into office, they ditch the economy. Every time Democrats get in, they save the economy. And then the other thing I wanted to say was, looking at January the 20th, 2024, when Pluto is 0, 0, 0 Aquarius, just by coincidence, talking about what I think Marsha was saying about, Mercury and communication. Well, transiting Eris is in a strong square on that day with Mercury. And Eris is like transiting Mercury is right on Eris on the same degree.
What's the date?
The date that Pluto enters into Aquarius for the next 20 years, January the 20th, 2024. So those
comes back
Mercury
to stay.
Yeah. And Mercury is heavily aspected. It's squaring.
You're right.
Transiting Eris is in a strong square with Mercury.
Yep.
And Mercury is right on the United States' Eris. So there's going to be a lot of communication going on.
Yeah, there
It's
really
going to be
right.
Eurasian communication. And then we'll be working on it for the next 40 years, long after I'm gone. But
I don't know how they're going to do
my
it.
2 cents.
I don't know how these young people are going to do it. I just don't know how.
They're going to do it just like every other generation did.
Our generation sure has been through a lot, but it's a whole different ball game with this group, and I don't know how they're going to do it. Sean, what do you think is going to happen?
I have no idea, but based off the energy, it just seems as if it's like this one big thing's gonna blow up. It's just the vibe.
Seems.
Yeah,
I'm very anxious. I'm very
yeah.
anxious to hear from Miss Deborah. Because Deborah has a lot of really good, very sane points. I've always liked Deborah because she's very sane. Come on, don't shake your head at me. You're muted. You're muted. There you go.
With big, simple summations of all of this conversation. I'm not good at the details. But when I think about that, the way we discussed Pluto and Eris, which have both been, kind of following each other.
Right.
Or opposite each other. I think there's something about them together that has a personal quality, and that what we need is a collective quality. So I think they're lacking. Pluto and Eris will help us understand where we went wrong, where we're going wrong, but we have to look to another planet or another energy to be different when this is all over in 40 years or 50 years, when we figure it out. And I just I know I'm being vague here, but
no, it's very clear. Go ahead.
I think it's the personal versus the collective. I think that's where we are now. And I think when we look to Pluto and Eris, we can see that. And the anger and the disappointment, and those are all valid, and they're relative, but they're in the now as we look back. And as we look forward, I don't know that looking a lot at Eris and a lot at Pluto is going to help us get to a better place. I don't think that's going to help us build. I just think.
So you're suggesting that perhaps one of the inner planets is going to shift its nature to help out?
Well, I don't know. Another thing that occurred to me, but I think you answered it without knowing that I had a question. I was going to ask you, with the Eris and Pluto dynamic, is one the higher octave or lower octave of the other, or is there a different octave for Eris that?
No, they're like really strange bedfellows. They're like two weirdos that happen to be at the same party. They're pretty strange collectively, but what's unusual is they are very much alike when you pull these two out of the sky. But no, they're well, let's let Rick answer this. He's more talented with mythology than I am.
So when you talk about the collective, there is, Pisces definitely is connected to this understanding of a large school of fish, right? So Neptune does have this awareness of the unconscious. So if you could tap into the unconscious, that's one place. Uranus is the great awakener. It does have a connection to the masses in that regard. Pluto, it has its connection to the masses because we all die. You can't escape death. It's the unifier of all men. Everybody's different until they die. Then they're all the same. And Pluto in the chart does represent the masses. You will sometimes look at the moon for the public in some regards. Is it in business, perhaps? But there's some relevance to the moon, but I really think to have any type of great impact, you're going to need something that has a slow moving pattern, because all of those fast planets don't have enough oomph to be sustained to make a great change.
Maybe it will be one of the other 75 that we've not. One of them's called Moo Moo, and they got strange name.
Chimera or something.
Yeah.
I think also we can't underestimate Chiron, because it's with that 51-year orbit. As soon as people started talking about Pluto return, I looked at the chart, and that's when I saw Chiron in T-square. And I thought, whoa, 102 years ago, prior to 2020, was 1918, the flu epidemic. Another 51 years.
Two 51s.
Yeah, we had another major epidemic in the 60s that gets whitewashed over. We don't remember it.
That's a good idea.
And then social unrest.
That's a very good idea. And being like Virgo, they like to keep their nose clean. They like to be involved, but keep their nose clean. Stay out of it. Be involved, but stay out of it. They've got a real art of doing that. I think that's a very nice nomination there.
Yeah. So maybe it will take a combination of a good grounding with the next 20 years and with Pluto's influence in Aquarius. But maybe it's also bringing us forward to this next Chiron return for the US, that it's going to be this cycle that we're looking at.
When is that?
What's that?
When is the next Chiron return?
I did not check it out for sure, but let me think. I think it was.
Let me pause right here and I'll check it.
Okay.
So about 2007 D
Right.
will be the next Pluto. Okay, well, thank you very much. There's some good contributions, Deborah. I like those ideas. And thank you, Rick. And now it's time to do a drum roll and point the finger at Susan's art effort, her art efforts. And she's muted. Here's her drawing of Claudia.
And I worked a bit more on my kitty as well. So I'm trying to work on cats and dogs
Oh, I love
Very,
that.
very, very good.
because
Before
I have to figure out how to teach it for the campground coming up in a couple weeks.
you got some good ideas. Before I forget, I do not want to leave out Sharon. Sharon, thoughts from you and from Kathy? She's who is that? Is that Claudia?
I saw it, Claudia, too.
Oh, okay.
And
Did you have
there
any?
you go.
Who's that?
You.
Ah,
Oh, nice.
let me see that again.
You got me inspired.
Oh my God, I do. Huh? Hey, let's not exclude anybody. Include
I just wanted
Sharon and Kathy.
I just wanted to say quickly, Rick, when you talked about what happened with Pluto and Sagittarius and Scorpio to some degree, and I remember the AIDS virus was something that really rocketed through kind of between Scorpio and to Sagittarius. And the saying in Sagittarius was silence equals death, I think was one of those catchphrases that really stuck with me. And there was also, interestingly enough, an anti-globalization movement. Like there was a whole lot of stuff that happened politically at that time, and it went 180 degrees when Pluto went to Capricorn. It was just, and the saying that I keep thinking of for Pluto and Capricorn was the personal is political.
The person is political.
The personal is political, which I'm actually thinking more as an Aries thing. That
That's
the
very
Aries,
good. Yeah.
and that I wonder if we're going to get another one of those swacks when Pluto moves into Aquarius and back, and we're going to feel another one of those political.
Oh yeah. You're gonna get a finale.
Yeah, and I think
the
a
final act.
I think
Pluto
a fanaticism.
leaves- Go ahead.
Sorry, I think a fanaticism is partly what, and I think the edge that we see in Eris is fanaticism, but in the counter, like, oh yeah, well, watch this.
She's got
Oh,
two wild sides. That's right.
Then you're going to have like almost like two gunslingers coming across,
Right. Yeah.
you know, Tombstone, or you know, like, woo woo woo, bah,
Yeah.
bah, bah.
I think you need your own show.
And well,
You're
but
pretty
that's
good.
the picture I keep getting, is that Eris is going to take no prisoners, and Pluto is like, we're all going to end up, you know, like Pluto already knows what the ending is, but Eris is going to like make a showdown out of it. That's sort of my intuition about it.
That's wild. It's gonna be crazy. Thank you very much. And Kathy, what thoughts are on your mind today?
I feel like there's a crescendo coming somewhere in the future here, and I can kind of grasp what everybody is saying, but
You accidentally hit your mute, Kath.
sorry, everybody has their own input into it, and together we'll create our future. So
Yeah, if we get a bunch more groups like this, we'll have some fun. Hey, Susan, do you want to say something?
Yeah, I see Pluto entering into Aquarius as a release of tension, personally. I think it's going to be a new generation, making the 60s look like the 1920s. and I think that they're going to be pushing for climate change, you know, to rectify climate change. And I think that, you know, technology is going to take a huge leap with regard to AI. And I think that these are going to be huge areas for Pluto and Aquarius.
Stay tuned, everybody. Stay tuned. What a wonderful evening. Good job, everybody.
Good job. You good job. You good job. You good job.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Rick. Thanks, everybody. We'll be
Good
on
night,
we'll be on
everybody.
YouTube in about 2 hours.
Rick,
Many blessings all.
Many
food for
blessings.
thought.
Good night, everybody. What'd you say, Erica?
Food for
Food for thought. Yes.
Yeah.
That's all.
Bye.